Okay, I should be live. Uh, Billy Lee, you used to be a moderator. You had a wrench, didn't you? Can't really tell on this end, and I didn't bring it up on YouTube. So I should probably do that quick just so I know what I'm doing. One, and mute that so I'm not listening to myself. Yeah, I screwed it up the other night trying to add somebody else as moderator, and I think I ended up erasing a couple of people by accident. But I'll try to remember to put you back on, give you a wrench back here when we're done, because it doesn't show on the StreamYard side who's a moderator or not. Anyways, let's see who all we got here tonight. Cynthia Wesley, good to see you. Elizabeth Mendiola, Annie Vermonter, Honey J. Badger, Raymond, Billy Lee, Rachel Stratman. Are we cooking tonight? No, I'm not going to cook tonight. Probably not next week either, because I'll be. See what day. Well, I'll be working. Next week I'll be working nights, but I'll be up early enough to do a show. Right now, my schedule looks like I'll be able to do a show every week into February, I think. So that'll be kind of nice. Then after that, I'll end up missing a few here and there, but it looks good for next month anyway. Darla Allred, howdy. Randy Duffy, Corey Clark, Mike Newby, nice to see you. Dan, Six Drops, Bookworm, Walker Rebels. Let's see, Morgan Freedom, Sanudo, howdy. Cast Iron Restore, Happy New Year. Yeah. All right, I'm going to pour myself some bourbon. I think it's about time to retire that poor little jelly glass I've been using. It's getting pretty chipped up on the rim. I'll just have to keep an eye on where I'm drinking from. I got a good deal a couple of weeks ago on a big bottle of bourbon. Usually it's about $30 for a liter, but they had a 175 for $39.99. So came out ahead on that deal. And it'll keep me in bourbon for a while. The only drawback is the 175s, you got a screw top on them instead of a cork, like the liters. Glug, 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 glug. Yeah, that should hold me. Happy belated holidays and stuff. Well, thank you much. 6 drops. I appreciate the super chat. They're always appreciated. You're considering Taiwan cast iron made pots. Most of the Taiwan and Korea stuff is pretty good. There's some that's pretty rough and nasty here and there. There was a lot of made in Taiwan stuff that was imported in the 70s and 80s. Usually has a wooden handle on it, and some of that was pretty bad. But the majority of the made in Taiwan stuff is really pretty good. So you can get it cheap. Usually, I mean, it's inexpensive. You know, nobody wants made in Taiwan or made in Korea stuff, but works great. Most of it does. So I really got no. One of my favorite little pans is made in Taiwan, and it works great for browning potatoes for some reason. Does the best job of pretty much any pan I have. You'll notice even, with the same size, the same maker, the same era of pan, every pan performs a little different. Some are a little bit better for browning. Some sear meat a little better than other ones. Some work a little better in the oven. It's just a matter of using what you got and kind of learning how it does. It's not usually a huge difference, but you do notice a difference in them. Do you say thinner cast iron like Wagner is better for searing? Yeah, it does kind of work. It's a little counterintuitive. You'd think the heavier would hold the heat better, and it does. It holds more heat because there's more mass to it, and it doesn't cool down as much. But the thinner cast also rebounds faster. It'll absorb heat from your stove faster than the thicker one, so the heat will come back up quicker. So it's kind of a 6 of one, a half a dozen of the other. But the thinner ones do seem to sear a little bit better than the heavier pans, where heavier pans seem to work a little better in the oven if you're finishing something off in the oven, or making cornbread in a skillet or something like that. They seem to buffer the heat better. They'll absorb heat while the burner is on, and they'll radiate that heat back while the burner is off, and kind of even things out a little more. So they seem to work a little bit better for searing. The thinner ones do. It's pretty good bourbon, that Bulleit. Let's see, back up here. You enjoyed the donut video? Yeah, those are tasty too. I mean, they're cornmeal donuts. You can taste the corn in them, but they do taste different than just like a cornbread would. They're sweeter, of course, because you got a pretty good bit of sugar in them, but they got a little bit different flavor to them. They're really good. So you can try them out. There's only a few ingredients in them, and just deep fry them up when you're mix them up. I mean, there's only like 4 or 5 ingredients. It's eggs, flour, cornmeal, sugar, and some flavoring and some yeast. Is deglazing with wine harmful to cast iron? No, not really. I mean, it's not. If you left sauce in there overnight, the acid would get a little bit, kind of strip it a little bit, but no, it shouldn't hurt anything. Or you might run into a problem with wine is if you're braising beef and wine for hours in the oven in a plain iron Dutch oven, then sometimes you can start really pulling seasoning out of it. So you're better off, if you're going to do something really acidic for a long time, to use an enameled cast iron pan for stuff like that. But just deglazing the frying pan, making a pan sauce with wine, that isn't going to hurt anything. Let's see. Destroyer of Men 75, new to vintage cast iron, but I've learned a lot from this channel. Well, thank you. I try. I do what I can. Share the stuff I found. I think next week I'll do another stream on the Goodwill auction site. I've been, kind of saving up a bunch of the newer manufacturers like Stargazer, Finex, and that. And I got a couple of skillets and some other things. There weren't a lot of skillets that have come up lately, of the newer ones, Butter Pat, Field Company, and whatnot. But there's some of the other stuff. And during the week, I'll look up the prices on what they are new and compare them a bit. Usually the skillets tend to go, for not that much less than the actual new price a lot of times. But, these were fairly decent buys, most one I've seen so far. But they're mostly sauce pans, things like that, and there's not quite as much of a demand for them. Gregory Green, hoping to have a great year so far. Well, first few days have worked out pretty well so far. You can't find any Lady Best. Yeah, I don't have any. I don't have a whole lot of BSR. I've got some. I got a few of different things, but the only Lady Best thing I have is a little 5x5 square skillet. I mean, you can make a grilled cheese sandwich in it, and that's about it. Picked up a Crescent waffle iron made by Fanner, but I can't find what years Fanner was making them. I'm not exactly sure either. I think they were out of business by the 50s anyway. But I think it was mostly 20s, 30s, 40s. But don't really quote me on that. I don't know for sure. I noticed the Blacklock Lodge does a better job searing than your regular Lodge. Yeah, like I said, the thinner ones seem to sear better because you get, they lose more heat when you first throw the cold meat in there, but the heat comes back up a lot faster, and I think that works better for works better for searing. Found a BSR fish fryer that actually has a lid with it. Well, that's cool. A lot of times you don't find lids for the fish fryers for some reason. Some of them were made that you could use them for a griddle separately, but yeah, it's kind of weird. They get separated because that's not the sort of thing you would really use that lid for anything else. Like I said, other than some of the ones that you can use for a griddle type of thing. But I mean, like Dutch ovens, a lot of times a Dutch oven lid will get used for a skillet or something else, and they can get separated. But yeah, usually big oval fish fryer stays with it. Let's see. He made a batch of donuts yesterday. Family liked them. The cornmeal ones. Yeah, a lot of those. I made a couple of different kinds of donuts out of that 1893 cookbook, and they tend to be a bit heavier than what most modern donuts are. They're not raised as much, and even the ones that are raised, they tend to be a fair bit denser. But the taste is really good, and those cornmeal ones, they're fairly light. I mean, even they puffed up when you're frying them. They kind of shrank back down once they cooled, but they definitely got a lot airier with that yeast. Uh, your go-to is still your best to cook in favorite ware. Yeah, I got one of those too. I think it's a number 9. Yeah, they cook real good too. Your wife baked pineapple upside down cake in her grandma's old cast iron skillet. Has the slickest inside. Yeah, they wear in. I mean, you don't have to use wooden utensils on them or nothing like that. You don't have, if it's really well seasoned, you don't need to worry about scraping the seasoning because you're not gonna, because it's really bonded to the iron and to the the texture of the iron, because that's what seasoning really is. It's a layer of carbon and oil and polymerized oil that is bonded to the metal, and it separates the food from the metal. And over the years, using a regular metal spatula on them, you get a little bit of wear and it really smooths them out. Let's see. What's my experience with Stargazer? I don't have any. I mean, the only one of the modern manufacturers that I have, apart from Lodge, of course, but the newer ones like Stargazer and Finexes, I have a little Smithy chef's pan, which I haven't actually used yet either. I haven't got around to cleaning it up, but I haven't used any of the newer stuff, so I don't really know one way or the other, how they work. I have some friends who have warping in their pans. I wonder. Yeah, I do. I don't really know anything about them. You have a old Griswold 24-inch skillet. That's a big one. And the spider that your grandma nearly destroyed. Going to try to restore. Any tips for cleaning the rust besides scrubbing forever? Yeah, for us, there's the two main ways of getting rid of rust are either electrolysis or a vinegar bath. If you just have one or two pans to do, a vinegar bath is it's easiest to do. You don't have a lot of setup, and you don't need to get a battery charger and all that sort of stuff. But for a vinegar bath, just find a plastic tub or a tote big enough to submerge the pans in, and you mix up a 50-50 solution of just cheap white vinegar and water. A gallon of water for every gallon of vinegar, and let it soak for a few hours, and scrub it off, see how it's doing. You don't want to leave it in there too overly long because it can kind of etch the surface a little bit, and if it's got a real fine surface, it'll roughen it a little bit, not a whole lot. But if they're rusty, Just let them soak for a couple of hours, scrub them off a little bit, see how they're doing, throw them back in if they still got rust on them, and it cleans them right up pretty good. So that's probably the easiest way if you just have a couple of them to do. Yours has a grill lid. Yeah, that would explain why a lot of them get separated because, like I said, some of them you can use for a griddle, and they'll get separated then. But I'll show you what I found here in a little bit. Bass Pro Shop has Black Lock, Fine X, and Regular Lodge. Well, that's good to know. I've never been impressed with the Stargazer I have. Yeah, like I said, I haven't used any of them, so I don't know much about them other than most of them are fairly expensive. But if it's good, it's worth the price. If it's not, well, it's not. So I still haven't forgot to look for a deep fryer for chicken. Got to look at a couple of flea markets locally for a good one. Any suggestions? Uh, you can use a Dutch oven for deep frying. They work pretty good. You'll need a bit more oil than you normally would. They also made, specifically made deep fryers. They were like a deep uh, saucepan type of thing, and some of them had baskets in them, and they had a lid. But they tend to be expensive for the vintage ones. They're fairly hard to find, especially if they still have the lid and the basket in them. Then you'll pay quite a bit for them. But they are out there, specific cast iron deep frying pots. But otherwise, a Dutch oven or a cast iron wok you can use for deep frying too. So something like that would work pretty good. But the vintage ones, Griswold and Wagner made them. Volrath made some, I know, and probably others. And you can also find like 1 quart and 2 quart uh, Lodge and BSR fairly deep saucepans. It might not be quite enough for deep frying. They might not be quite big enough around, but you can you can get them for that. But just a regular chicken fryer too, you can usually get fairly, like Honey Badger said here, you can get a brand new Lodge chicken fryer with a lid for about $40. And that would work too. There's a lot of different options out there. Paid $175 for your fish fryer. Yeah, it's pretty good price. I mean, I've seen them go, especially if they have, some of the Lodge ones that have the wildlife scenes, the bass and that sort of stuff on the lid. A lot of them will go for 300-400 a lot of times. Plain ones, 250 is pretty common. So yeah, 175 is a pretty good price for it. Deep frying French fryers and a Wagner chicken fryer right now. Yeah, they work pretty good. Like so, Dutch ovens, chicken fryers. You will use a bit more oil than you would, in a deep fryer, but you can get more stuff in them too. Seen them sell for around 500 with a lid. Yeah, but one with a lid don't happen too often. Yeah, they're usually pretty spendy. Let's see what else we got here. Show you a couple of things. I found something, got a hell of a good deal on this at a place I wouldn't really have expected to get quite that good of a deal. Found me an Alfred Andresen heart-shaped waffle iron. Got the heart shapes in there. Pretty good shape. You see it's a little rusty inside. The outside is clean. And it has a base for it. And the whole thing only cost get around picture there $14.99. That was a hell of a good deal. Usually these go for 75 to 125 bucks a piece. I've seen them selling for, especially the heart shaped ones. You know, the Krumkaka irons are a little bit cheaper. These were made by Griswold. I mean, this is just a basic number 8 Griswold waffle iron base. And if you can find one of these by itself, you know, you're looking at 75 to 100 bucks usually just for that. So, and the place I got it, they're usually a bit high. I mean, they got somebody in the back room that knows a little bit about cast iron, and usually anything at all that's marked, you know, obviously marked anyway, they usually want 40, 50 bucks for it. And this was only 15. So they must have been on vacation for Christmas or something, because this was like 3 days after Christmas when I was down there. And it was just on the shelf, and I, of course, grabbed it. But yeah, they made these, you know, this was made by Griswold. Alfred Andresen wasn't actually a manufacturer. You see there, you know, it says Minneapolis. He is a guy, he owned the Western Importing Company based out of Minneapolis. And he designed, you know, made some designs, mostly Scandinavian type things, you know, the heart-shaped waffles, the Krumkaka irons, and they also made Rosette irons. And the very first couple of years, they farmed out the manufacturing to a couple of local foundries. So they're real hard to find ones that aren't made by Griswold. And if you do find one that isn't a Griswold, it's going to be a bit more, but they're pretty scarce. But after that, they farmed it out to Griswold to make their stuff. And the Western Importing Company forced Alfred out of the company about 1915. So they made these from about 1895 or so to 1915 with the Alfred Andresen name on it. And after that, they were a Western Importing Company. And some of the bases, this one, I don't know if you can see it, it's pretty faint on there, but you see it, it's Griswold marked. Some of them were marked WIC, but they still had the Griswold catalog number on them. And, you know, a lot of times they were kind of interchangeable. You see these quite a bit that have Griswold bases on them. Sometimes you see them that have WIC marked bases on them, but a lot of times they're Griswold. And it's not necessarily a mismatch. And which brings me to my next little point. Somebody had mentioned in the comments on my last, maybe not the last one, but a recent stream, when I showed you that, let me set this aside to where I can get my other stuff. You can sit there? All right. Somebody mentioned the slant logo number 10 Dutch oven, Griswold Dutch oven lid that my wife has had forever and I've had now, isn't necessarily a mismatch with the large logo Dutch oven I found, because a lot of them came right from the factory with mismatched logos, and that wasn't uncommon. And so a lot of the dates that you see for certain types of logos, they usually overlap by anywhere from 2 to 5 years, because they would use the older style patterns until the patterns were worn out, and then they would, you know, switch over to the new logos, especially with things that you know, some of the more smaller selling items, you know, usually like a number 8 skillet, that would change over right away because they were constantly using the patterns for them because it's a real popular size. So you'd see the new logo on like a number 8 skillet first, but something like a number 13 or a number 4 or something like that, a lot of times the old logos would stick around for a few years until they had worn those patterns out. So it's not necessarily a mismatch, but, you know, it's not a perfect match. So it's kind of hard to say which, you know, because I know that lid didn't come with that Dutch oven, but it's possible to have a Dutch oven and lid that have never been separated. They came right from the factory that way with different styles of logo. There's a good example, Wagner Ware. changed over from this style of logo to the stylized logo that most people are familiar with. They did that about 1917, 1918. And in 1924, they switched over. They started putting a 4-digit catalog number on the back, and they moved the size number to the top of the handle. But there are uh, Wagner pans that had this style of a logo, but they also have the catalog number and the size number on the handle. And that's because sometime in the early to mid 20s, Wagner went through and they cleaned out the pattern room. They found a bunch of patterns with the old logo on them that were perfectly serviceable. So they just updated them a little bit, put the catalog number on it. They did start that in 1924. So we know they were made after 1924 because they have the number on them, but they had a logo that was supposed to have been phased out by 1918. So it's kind of an anachronism, but there are things like that out there. I mean, you can see where there's a definite overlap in the dates of production, and it's really common. So, and another thing that Wagner also did in the 30s and 40s, a lot of the cast iron Dutch ovens that they made came with aluminum trivets that were made for their aluminum Dutch ovens. So even though you have a cast iron Wagner Dutch oven with a marked Wagner aluminum trivet, it's not necessarily a mismatch because they did sell quite a few of them right from the factory like that. So if you got an aluminum trivet, you can also get away with putting it in your cast iron Dutch oven, and it's not going to be really a mismatch. Stay Gold, good to see you. Back up a little bit here while I was talking. Just showing off now. Yeah, I mean, I was really surprised to see that for $15 because, like I say, usually anything that's marked there, they'll put it up front in their, they got a display case by the checkout, and they usually want $40-50 for it. Even, Wagner Ware Griswold, they want a little bit more for. But yeah, pretty much anything marked is more expensive. So whoever's in the back that knows a little bit about cast iron must have been on vacation. It was a 3 days after Christmas miracle. You have a Griswold Erie number 14. What do they go for? Quite a bit. Number 14, pretty much anything bigger than a number 11 goes for big money. Something like that could easily sell for anywhere from $300 to $600. It's kind of depends on who's looking for it at the time, but yeah, I mean, a number 14 goes for quite a bit. I paid for that and ran to the truck with it. Pretty much, yeah. I didn't hesitate on grabbing it. Who knew a cloverleaf shape also has 4 hearts? Yeah. Yeah. And, there's some Griswold marked ones like that too. They're identical except for the markings on them. But you will pay more for the Griswold than you will for an Alfred Anderson or a Western importing company. But they're made from the same patterns, both made by Griswold. So, like I say, if you can find if you find a Krumkaka iron or a waffle iron like that, that's a Griswold base. That'll fit a number 8 Griswold waffle iron. If you have one that needs a base, you can just swap them back and forth, and it'll work just great. Yeah, it's in pretty good shape. I mean, it's really clean. It doesn't look like it's got a lot of use, but it did get a little rusty on the inside, but that's not a big deal. Let's see. Happy New Year. Good. Happy New Year to you too. You have a number 8 with what looks like a small M on the bottom. Number 8, what? A lot of the Wagner wares, they had a little, sometimes they put a little letter on the handle or a letter after the catalog number. That was a mold number, depending on what pattern they were using, so they could keep track of which patterns were wearing out or making bad pans. You weren't getting a good impression in the mold. So small letters like that are pretty common. Most all manufacturers had some sort of a way of tracking, keeping an eye on which patterns were starting to get bad. They would either letter them or number them or something like that. Small number, either on the bottom of the pan, on the bottom of the handle, or after the catalog number, was really common. Any ideas for a BSR shallow fish fryer with a lid? Yeah, I couldn't tell you. Like I say, most of the fish fryers, you're looking at a minimum of 250 on up. 250 to 400, 450 sometimes. So, what a fair price would be if you can find it for less than 250. Definitely is a good price. Found your little Sportsman grill with 4 legs and a wildlife scene for $40. Called your brother in Chicago. Oh yeah, that's a hell of a good price for a little Sportsman grill. What else? I was going to mention something else here. What was I going on about? I probably won't be cooking next week either, but I think, I'm going to put my glasses here, double check my schedule. I think I'm actually off, not next Tuesday, but the following. Let's see here. Tonight's Tuesday. Yeah, I'm off. That'd be the 17th. I'm actually off the Tuesday after that too. So one of those 2 days, or maybe both of them even, I could probably do some kind of cooking on the wood stove and see what we can come up with. $450, someone get you off the floor. Yeah, I mean they're in demand. You have a waffle iron that's a Montgomery Ward, patented September 15th, 1925. Who could have made it? Probably Wagner. Wagner made a lot of Montgomery Ward and Wardway stuff in the 20s and 30s. So it's probably a Wagner made by him anyway. I've heard of Maid of Honor. Looks Asian. Everybody on eBay are calling them vintage 4-notch Lodge. Yeah, they are made by Lodge. They're made by Lodge for Sears in the, I believe, from about 1940 on into the 50s. So yeah, they are made by Lodge. And I do think they did have 4 notches in the heat ring. They did a few things different like that for stuff that they made for other people. And they put it instead of having their usual 3 notches in it. It's not a 4-notch Lodge, but it's a 4-notch pan that was made by Lodge. So, it's a Maid of Honor. But yeah, they made them for Sears. So while calling it a 4-notch Lodge isn't really technically correct, it is kind of technically correct too, because it was made by Lodge and it has 4 notches in the heat ring. Your heart's desire is the mallard duck in flight. Came so close one time I literally cried. Yeah, they made, like I said, the Lodge made a lot of different scenes. fish, ducks flying, deer. I got a new antique store opening in town. Can't wait to see look for the cast iron. Yeah, it's always always good to find someplace new that you haven't been to in a new shop. If they got something nice, kind of good to give a local business a little support. I have a made to honor meat grinder. That's cool. But yeah, a lot of big foundries made stuff under other names for Sears and Montgomery Ward and uh other catalogs, more discount brands like Wagner made National was one of their brands that was more of a discount brand, and Griswold made Victor, the a couple different variations of those. Again, that was a bargain, discount brand, a budget brand, whatever you want to call it. They're a little cheaper. A lot of times they would use some of the older patterns. Are not quite as perfect as a Griswold or Wagner branded one would be, but they're usually really good quality regardless. I mean, you might find a few more minor casting flaws in them. They didn't do quite as fine of a job of finishing them. But they also made Griswold made Puritan. Griswold and uh, Favorite both made Puritan brand cookware for Sears. Montgomery Ward Wagner made a lot of stuff for Montgomery Ward, both with the Montgomery Ward name on it and Wardway. There was Good Health. I can never remember offhand whether it was Wagner or Griswold that made it. There was Best Made Lodge or Maid of Honor. Lodge made Maid of Honor, and that was for Sears. So, there's a lot of kind of side jobs that a lot of these big foundries did for other people, and did so they could sell them a little bit cheaper on their own too. The older series of Lodge, Mallard, and Flight came in a 5 and an 8. Okay. Good Health was Griswold. Okay. What's the other one I'm thinking of? Best Made. Wagner made one, and they both look fairly similar too. And I can never keep them straight. I've got both of them, and I can never keep the two of them straight. Yeah, it was Good Health and Best Made. I think it was that Wagner made. Long Life. That's it. Long Life. But yeah, I mean, for some reason I can never keep the two of them straight. It just drives me nuts. I know with the Puritan, you can tell the ones that are made by Griswold from the ones that were made by Favorite, by Favorite Peakware real easy, because the Griswold ones, they look a lot like the Griswold Iron Mountain series, Iron Mountain range, but they don't have the oblong handle on. They got kind of a regular looking handle, but they have a heat ring, and the overall shape of the pan, they have an inset heat ring, and they look a lot like the Griswold Iron Mountain ones. Or the Puritans that are made by Favorite, they look like any other Favorite skillet. They have the outside heat ring, and everything about them is identical to a Favorite skillet, except for having the Puritan name on them. How long can a piece of cast iron last? What's the oldest known that still looks good, I wonder? I don't know about the oldest known one. There's there's cast iron kettles and pots from the 15 and 1600s around, so they can definitely last that long. I mean, they can last pretty much forever as long as they're taken care of. They don't get buried out in the yard and rust away. But as far as just something that's getting used in the kitchen, you'll never wear them out. I mean, they'll last for centuries. And cast iron, I'm pretty sure the Chinese were starting to make cast iron cookware back 2,000, 3,000 years ago. So it's been around for quite a long time, 2,000 years anyway. With something that's just that's just being used, normal everyday use, it will last pretty much forever. I mean, I've got a lot of cast iron that's 100, 150 years old that I use all the time, and it looks, like it's brand new. Well, not brand new, but and it looks just great. So like I said, in fact, that waffle iron I showed you, this was made 1900 to 1915. So that's over 100 years old, and it's really nice shape. There's no real obvious wear and tear to it. A little bit of rust inside. I mean, I don't think this thing ever really got used that much. It did get used some. You can see the base has got a little bit of buildup on the very inside of it. But that's it's not uncommon to see cast iron that's 100 to 150 years old. That's in great shape and is perfectly usable. Best made was also Griswold. Okay. Yeah, I have all three of those, and I can never, for some reason, I can't keep them straight. It just drives me nuts. I can tell them apart just by looking at them, but you can't. You never quite remember which ones are which. You saw number 8 and that you want and studied for a price drop and lost out. Yeah, I mean, sometimes, it never fails if it's an auction and something you want and you bid on it, the bidding will run wild and the price will go way up. If you don't bid on it, it'll sell dirt cheap. If you wait for something to go on sale, it'll go on sale and somebody will grab it before you do, or it'll never go on sale and somebody will just buy it. It never seems to work out in your favor other than just by blind dumb luck, walking in on something and finding a $100 waffle iron for 15. But you have to kind of figure out what you're willing to spend on something. If it's something fairly common, not too hard to find, you can usually get it fairly cheaper. And if you miss out on it, you're not going to be heartbroken. But if it's something unusual, something hard to find, you're best off usually just to buy it if you can afford it. If you're willing to spend what they're asking for it or close to it anyway. A lot of times you're better off just getting it. But like I say, if it's something common, just a ordinary number 8 Griswold skillet, there'll be other ones around, if you miss out on it. Some of the oddball stuff, yeah, I mean, if you'll have to make the decision whether you want to pay the price for it, is what it comes down to. Do you really need it? Do you really want it? Can you really afford it? And, just run with that, because a lot of times if you dither on something like that, you'll end up either paying more or you won't be able to get it at all. But, if it's something fairly common, waffle irons, I've seen the prices all over the place on them. Sometimes, a Griswold waffle iron with a base, sometimes they'll sell for $150, $175. Sometimes they'll sell for $100. If you miss out on one at $150, hang around, you can probably get one for $100 somewhere. But something that's hard to find, like a number 13 or 14 skillet, if you're thinking, well, they want 125, maybe if I wait a bit, I can get it for 120. You're probably better off just spending 125 and getting it, because a lot of times they'll go for more than that to begin with. And they're not very common. The really big skillets aren't very common, and there's a lot of demand for them lately. So it can be it can be tough to decide sometimes, whether or not to pull the trigger on a deal or not. The older Lodge Wildlife series, I got the deer, bought it in '91. Any idea of the value of it? Not really. I mean, I know about them, and I know a lot of people have gotten into collecting them lately, especially. But I don't really know what they sell for. I haven't really dealt with them very much, so I couldn't tell you. But they're nice to have. There are a fair number of them out there, so you shouldn't be paying really huge prices for them. But they do go for pretty good money. More so than ordinary skillet will. But I don't really know what a fair price on something like that would be. Your go-to skillet is a Gatemark pan that's probably 120 years old. Yeah, I mean, there's tons of stuff. Like I said, a lot of the stuff I have is 100, 125, 130 years old. I got a couple things from the 1850s and one pot that's probably older than that. Probably could be anywhere from 1840 to 1870. So you're getting into the 150-year range pretty quick, and not all that far from the 200 now. But and yeah, the stuff, it will last forever. So if you pay a little bit more for it now, it's money you're only going to have to spend once, really, and it's money your grandkids ain't going to have to spend. Very explosive now. I don't have a clue. Yeah, no, I don't. And it used to be, there weren't a lot of people into collecting the Lodge, the wildlife series, and the, Rosie the Riveter, which is, the last year or two that came out. But a lot more people have gotten into cast iron, and a lot more people have started to notice the older and even the newer Lodge, the, I don't know what you call them, figural, the kind of the custom made ones with the scenes and the figures on the back. So the prices are really taken off the last couple of years. But I really don't know. I haven't followed them, so I don't really know what a fair price for some of it would be. Probably wouldn't be a bad idea to kind of keep track of Lodge, the stuff they're making now, and if you're interested in collecting that sort of stuff, getting it while it's new and current, because that's probably the cheapest you're going to get it. 5 years from now, you're going to end up paying twice of what you could have bought it for 5 years ago. There's a moose on Goodwill. Huh. I haven't seen that one. I haven't gone all the way through it in the last couple of days. I know there's one on the Goodwill site, but I can't remember what it is. I think it's another bass. They had a bass on there a couple of weeks ago when we were talking about these. You have a Lodge small logo with a 4 USA ATF with a matching frying pan lid. If it says made in USA on it, it was made after the early 60s, 63, 64 is when there was a law passed requiring that you put the country of origin on stuff. So most of your of cast iron of all brands, once it says made in USA on it, it was probably made after 1964. They did away with the law a few years ago, and not everybody really paid attention to it for the last 10 or 15 years anyway. So but Lodge, pretty much after 1964, pretty much everything has made in USA on it somewhere. So it'd be from about 1964 on up to a Lodge small logo. If it has the logo on it where it actually says Lodge, they started back with that in, I think, the mid 70s or so. They started putting the Lodge name on it again, from about 1930 up until the mid 70s. Lodge didn't have the Lodge name on them. So if it has the Lodge logo on it, you're getting up into the 1970s. So probably 1970 up until I think 1992, they switched over to the logo that they're using now. A little bit after that, I think, because I have the older style logo on a pan that I know I bought in the early 90s. So, maybe mid to late 90s, they switched over to the style logo they're using now. So, from what you're saying, I would have to say, mid 70s to mid 90s. And as for worth, there's not a lot of, collector demand for them. So, but just kind of a generic price for a chicken fryer with a lid, 40, $50 in there somewhere. Got your BSR stove back together yesterday. Now you want to cook something. Yeah. I mean, they're nice to cook on. I mean, it takes a little, there's a little bit of a learning curve, learning how your stove acts, how your pans are going to act on it. You really got to keep an eye on things when they're frying because you can't just turn the heat up and down. So you got to move the pan around to different spots on the stove where it's hotter or cooler. Keep an eye on how fast things are cooking, and you should be okay. It's not all that difficult. I mean, learning how to cook on the stovetop is pretty easy. Learning how to bake in a wood-fired oven, that's a little bit harder. It takes a little bit more patience and practice, and you will definitely screw a few things up. I mean, I've done it on camera a couple of times where things kind of overcooked on the top, and it takes a little bit of learning, but it's worthwhile. I mean, it's fun to cook on a wood stove. I mean, there's just no getting around it. You heard that, but no idea on what they're worth. Your very first piece you bought. Yeah, I mean, for, like I say, for just a generic price, a chicken fryer, no matter who made it, if it has a lid, you can usually get them for 40, $50. And of course, there'll be some that sell for more. And sometimes you can get them cheaper than that too. So just keep an eye out. And yeah, you really want it, you really need it, but you ain't willing to pay more than any of your utilities. Yeah, I mean, you got to keep a check on your spending. Sometimes it's easy to get carried away. But like I say, if it's something rare and unusual and it's a good price, it's probably a good price as long as it isn't more than you can spend on something. I mean, a good price for an Erie Spider logo skillet. A good price would be $2,000. Well, I'm not going to spend $2,000 on a pan, but there's it's a balancing act. I mean, you got to figure out what you need, what you want, what you can afford. What are the odds that you'll be able to find it at this price again? And it's the dilemma you have to deal with. Pretty much for anything in life. Whether it's a car or a frying pan. Am I going to be able to afford this? Is this going to be worth my time and effort? A great price on a Bugatti is probably going to be a bit more than most folks can afford. But a great price on a Chevy, well, you're probably not going to find another Chevy like that cheaper, so you might just as well get that one. Hard to find in good shape. Which one were you after? Oh, the stove. Yeah, I mean, Birmingham stove and range. You'd expect to find at least a few Birmingham stoves and ranges around. And yeah, I'm sure they were a lot more common in the South than you'd find them up here. A lot of the stove companies, they're regional because it was a pretty good size item to ship. Yeah, you could ship them by train. In those days, it was mostly shipping by train, but you didn't have to go very far before the cost got prohibitive, and somebody down the road could make one for the same price and save you the shipping. I mean, shipping has always been a big price. The older Lodge deer is about 300 to 400. Oh, okay. Yeah, Wednesdays I'm gonna have to do a little studying on some of the older or even the newer, Lodge, the designed stuff. And I know that they also did a lot of custom stuff. I mean, you can have Lodge make you a skillet, with your logo, whatever you want on it, your name. I'm sure there's a minimum order, but you see them now and then, for different for advertising for different companies, things like that. Lodge will, run you off a batch of 1,000 or 2,000, whatever their minimum order is, or maybe it's less than that. I don't know, but you could have something made with your name on it, and they'll make it for you if you make enough of them. That's an eBay price. Yeah, well, I mean, eBay, it's an auction site. You can get a fairly good idea of what they're selling for, but the prices are kind of all over. But you can get an idea of at least a decent range of what they sell for, and usually if you kind of split down the middle between the highest and the lowest, you'll get a fairly fair price on it. With eBay though, a lot of times they'll have a ridiculous, buy it now price, or this, rare vintage something. Well, it's vintage, but it ain't rare. They'll try and sell something for $150. It's worth 75. So you got to keep an eye out for it. But you'll figure out, you can at least get a handle on at least something of a range of prices on things. I've been waiting to find the Buffalo Nickel Lodge. I've seen pictures of them, but I haven't seen any for sale anywhere. But I haven't really looked all that hard either. I know they made a guitar-shaped skillet. I don't know what that would be worth, but they made those, and they made a lot of different stuff. Bought several Wildlife series a few years ago and ordered one more today. Hope to pass them down. Yeah, the Retriever is 400. So yeah, I guess some of the older, the old first couple of series are going for $200 to $400. It's good to know. Making your eyes dizzy with those prices. Yeah, I mean that's there's enough demand for them out there. The price is going to go up. So, but I'd be willing to bet 10 years ago you probably could have gotten for 30 or 40. Well, some of them anyway. Some of them I'm sure they were always, a bit of demand for them, and they're scarce enough that people would pay a bit more. But yeah, I mean the last 5 years, 6 years, especially, but probably for the last 10, cast iron prices have been creeping up. There's gotten to be a lot more demand for it. A lot of people are getting away from Teflon and aluminum and things like that. So, a lot of people are switching over to cast iron the last few years. So the demand for, especially older vintage stuff has really taken off. If you look in the, the blue book and the red book, the book of Wagner and the book of Griswold, the prices from them are from, I think like 2005, and stuff that was selling for 30, 40, $50 in 2005 is selling for 300 and 400 now, which is quite a bit more, even allowing for inflation. So, but the demand has gone up, and it's a supply and demand sort of thing. Older nickel, I think WM has some newer nickel online for like $40 right now. Yeah, that'd be another thing you'd have to kind of keep an eye on. Like I said, I don't really know much about the different Lodge series, but is the older one? Is it an older one? How do you tell an old one from a new one, even if they're more or less the same design? Yeah, I'm sure there's ways of telling it apart, but I don't know offhand. So, it's definitely a subject worth pursuing if you're interested in. And you should definitely do research, on anything if you're looking to start collecting them, start buying them. Definitely do your research first. Buy a book first if there's one out there, or look online, shop around, find out what prices are. How do you tell one from another? What variations there are and things like that. And, get a handle on what they're worth and what you're going to spend on them before you start buying, because, it's real easy to buy a lot of a lot of stuff at what seems like a good price, but the reason it's a good price is because it's just not worth that much. So definitely look into it a bit before you leap in. Uh, the Lodge Fish Wildlife Series has a bass and a trout. Bass is the skillets, and the trout seems to be just the grill pans. Okay. And if you got any questions about it, ask Honey J Badger. He seems to know quite a bit about it. So, but yeah, I mean, any kind of cast iron. I mean, if you want to start buying, specializing in Griswold stuff, you want to have a wall full of nothing but Griswold. Look into it and see what it's selling for and what's worth more and what's worth less. You see it lately. I've been seeing a lot of the large logo heat ring skillets going for a lot more than they really should, because Griswold didn't stop making skillets with heat rings on them until they came out with a small logo in the early 40s. And even then, anything number 12 and bigger will still have a heat ring on it. Everything Lodge made or Griswold made bigger than the size 12 had a heat ring on it. But they, the whole time they made the large block logo, they did make skillets with heat rings because there was still demand for them. People still using wood cook stoves in the 20s, 30s, and 40s. And they still made ones with heat rings. They weren't as common as the smooth bottomed ones. That was their main line that they were selling. But kind of as an option or a special order, you could get one with heat ring. But they're not all that rare. I mean, they're not super rare, hugely valuable thing, but they are less common. So you should be paying a premium for them, but don't go paying twice as much for the same skillet with a heat ring as you would for one that has a smooth bottom, because it's not all that rare. There's a Erie Spider on eBay asking 5,500. This one's overpriced. Yeah, I mean, if it's really pristine, there was one that sold, I think, for like 9 or 10,000. 8 to 10,000 in that range, and it's pretty common to see them sell for 2 to 5,000. But the spider on the bottom, the logo in the middle was raised above the bottom, and it was a little bit higher than the heat ring was too. So they're really subject to wear. One that's pretty rough, and you can identify it as a Erie Spider, but that's about it. Got a lot of pitting on it, something like that. Got problems. You can get down as low as 1,000 for them. But yeah, if it's got a lot of sulfur pitting or a lot of wear on the logo, 5,500 would be pretty steep. It would have to be at least a really good solid mid grade, kind of a little bit of wear on it, but not a whole lot. One that was really absolutely brand new, pristine, would be worth more, but I'd have to go look at it and see. But yeah, if it's got a pretty significant wear and tear on it, a lot of sulfur pitting, 55 would be pretty high for it. They still make the buffalo nickel. That'd be cool, because I do like buffalo nickels too. Might have to go check one out and see if I've been a good enough boy to buy myself something nice. Anyway, we've been here for a little over an hour now, so I'm going to wrap her up here pretty quick. See if I can catch up quick on the comments. I'm a little bit behind. Your niece lived there, moved to Wisconsin, now in Colorado. Yeah, you're not going to be getting a whole lot warmer going from Wisconsin to Colorado. Oh, the doggies just outside throwing a fit, barking at the cats. I'll bring him in later. Oh, they went and neutered the buffalo on the newer ones, huh? You passed all the wildlife series, including the guitar one. Didn't know they had that value. Yeah, I mean, they weren't really all that expensive, not all that long ago. So, some I suppose were, but I haven't really paid a whole lot of attention to them either. So, might have missed out on something. But that's usually the way it goes. Find out something's worthwhile a little bit too late. Nice to see it fired up. Yeah, like I said, probably not next week, but the next week or two after that, I should have time to get a good fire going before I start the show and cook something up. Yeah, I did the shrimp last time. That was fun. But I'll think of something here. It's kind of, if I'm going to do it live, I got to try and find something that I can make in half hour, 45 minutes or so. And if you ever come across a Griswold 13 or 14 for 150 or 125, do you need to know about them? Yeah, pretty much everybody want to know about them for that price. Thanks, Mud. I found number 10 skillet has a J, E, and 10 all vertical. Yeah, I don't know. It's kind of hard to say if it has notches and one notch in the heat ring. If it has a heat ring, it could be a lodge that has maker's marks on it. A lot of them had the initial of the guy who did the actual casting of it, because a lot of them they got paid by piecework, and you don't want to put your name on all the stuff you made, so you got paid for it for that day. I mean, it could be could be an old lodge, could be an old BSR too. It's kind of hard to tell just from that. But anyhow, hit the thumbs up, hit the like button here, try and get the last few ones here. Stuffed bell peppers. I don't really like bell peppers anymore. I used to love them when I was a kid, but for some reason, I just don't like them anymore, which is weird because usually it's the other way around. Things you can't stand as a kid, you start to like as an adult. But 3-notch heat ring, yeah, that's probably a lodge from the late 30s on into the late 40s. But anyhow, I'm going to wrap her up here. I will see you guys next week. So, I'll see you next week. And hope you have a good week in the meantime. Comfort Doll, good to see you. Just in time to say goodbye. So, good night, all. And end.